Welcome to AFL Uncensored. I'm your host, Teej Johannesson. With me, as always, is my co-host, Omari Fraser. Before we get into our guests, Omari, obviously the Super Bowl just happened. Kind of a controversial way to end the game. And since this is a football podcast, I kind of want to talk about that a little bbit. So, first of all, did you watch it, and who with?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely watched that game and watched with a couple coworkers, and we all got together, brought some food, and had his potluck classic football Super Bowl party. I thought it was a really, really well executed game. I love this is definitely the game the NFL needed, like a high scoring game that had two great offenses. I know they had the stories of the two first black quarterbacks, the Kelsey Bowl, this bowl, the high schools all represented. So I thought that was really good on that front. I really love watching the Super Bowl for the play calls and the coaching, because someone now, I guess everyone in this podcast that has listened to it is going to be on it. Like, we all get football, but like that last 5 minutes of Kansas City, like that was Andy Reid and the coaching staff really just doing their job to, like, hey, we're going to really just coach this game really well to limit or in fact give no time to Philadelphia. And I think that's what won them the game.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there too. I watching their little people that don't really understand football, or even people that do understand football, some of the little stuff they were doing was ridiculous. Like those two little flat touchdowns where they had the guys wide open, and when you break that down, you actually see that the Eagles were in a HBR or halfback rotation on defense, where they shifted the corner to the safety and the safety down to stop the jet sweep, but then they planted and came back and ran that little flat route, which is kind of insane. And I don't actually know how you defend that. That holding call at the end, I want to talk about this a little bit, because I know that this has kind of been a hot button topic, and I've gotten into it with a little bit back and forth with people who are on both sides. And I have no dog in the race here. Like, I'm a Vikings fan. I don't really like the Eagles because of that, but for me, I was disappointed with the call, and a lot of people are pointing to the fact that Bradbury, the corner, said, "Oh yeah, I did hold him," and that's all well and fine. I don't think I'm arguing that there was a bit of a hold there. My argument was the best referees understand discretion and in the moment, and the best referees understand that they can't be making calls that are essentially deciding the game, especially when you break it down. So from my perspective, I watched the Kansas City receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster, lose 3 times. He lost on the initial release when he got jammed, which so for people that aren't receivers, there's always going to be a landmark pre-snap, right? So quarterback 2 seconds, where are you throwing, what route are you running, and where's your landmark? Where are you trying to finish? What's ideal? So as soon as your release gets stopped, your landmark is gone. You can't get to your landmark anymore. And that's what happened to Juju. So he ran this little stick out and up, right? And he got jammed off the initial line. He loses his momentum. He loses his timing. His landmark is gone. Now what happens because of that, the domino effect, is the pass rush is now going to get there, because Mahomes has to delay, because that's his route he wants to go to. So the pass rush gets there. So now that's the Eagles defense has already won twice in this snap, and now Mahomes has to throw off his back foot way left and deep from his landmark, and we still get a holding call, and that ends the game. So that's kind of my, like, from playing both receiver and DB. So I know this has been a big debate, but that's my position on it, because I don't think you should get rewarded for losing multiple times in a rep. You know what I mean? Like, the only time Juju actually won was when the ref threw the flag.
Yeah.
What do you think on that? You agree with me, or do you disagree? And be honest.
And I agree with you on that, just with just with how the play ran. Like, he definitely didn't have the cleanest release, got caught up, didn't get hands off. Again, like, he's the paid professional, so like, I don't want to go argue saying he should have done this, he should have done that, but like, when it comes to the verses, like, the DB definitely won the rep. And I've definitely, when I look back in my football career, like, I know for junior as well, like, I remember I was a receiver, a DB got called on penalty similar to that, where I had to turn it up on an out.
Yeah.
And then I remember the penalty got called on him for that. Same thing, I think, where he held and like was able to pull in off of me and got a call there. So like, I've been on the other side of it, and like, as you can see, as like been on both sides, and I guess the refs just really wanted to make their state in the game.
Yeah.
If I had to really take it outside of that, I think the other big play was that punt return by Kadarius Toney.
Oh yeah, I think that's the other thing too, right? Is people are like, oh well, that didn't cost them the game. I agree. The Chiefs deserved to win that game. Coming back, the Eagles kind of blew that. But just on that call, I didn't like it. I would have loved to see, as a football fan, Jalen Hurts get the ball and have a chance to march down the field. But it is what it is. I'm sure it'll be argued forever for a long time. So, okay, moving on here. Today, I know Omari and I are really excited to welcome the president of the league, Vince Roth, and the vice president of the league, Teej Sherman. Welcome, Teej and Vince.
Hey, happy to be here.
Good. I'll start with you, Teej. So I know you're new to the role. Talk to me about your football history, leading into your CFL career for a bit and then to the AFL.
All right. Well, I grew up in Edmonton. So I played at Harry High School. I'd started playing football since I was 8, just through community. Throughout Edmonton, ended up in Leduc. But in high school, I went back to Edmonton for that. I was in Harry Ainley and played junior my first year, and ended up winning the whole thing at the end. Last second, or a 2-point conversion at the end, ended up winning that final game there. And it was definitely the first highlight of my football career. And continued to play football through high school. Was pretty decent in grade 12. Didn't really get any university offers, though. I got a couple basketball ones, but no football. I worked my way to Victoria Rebels out in the BCFC. I played 2 years there. I got kind of recruited by University of Manitoba, but not really. At some point, I got a little chubby, and Brian Dobie forgot who I was. So,
yeah,
that was definitely the biggest I've ever been in my life. I think I was like 245.
Yeah. And what's your optimal? Like, what's your optimal playing weight now?
195, 200.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay.
So yeah. I was big.
Yeah.
And then I came back home to Edmonton. I ended up talking to U of A coaches, and they invited me out to their winter camps. And I enjoyed myself for the most part, but then getting closer to the end, they wanted me to switch positions, and I didn't really care. I was in, but then the next practice I showed up, they switched me to a different position again. So I said, no big deal. Came another time, did the same thing, and leaving that practice, I was like, nah, I don't know if I want to play here. And Brian Dobie, for some magical reason, called me the moment I walked out of that gym and said, hey, I'm in Edmonton. Want to go for lunch? I was like, sure, why not? And then played in Manitoba for the next 5 years. In between there was a time where I was absolutely lazy and was just fine with being the best on my team, you could say. And especially at safety. And my one coach sat me down, Stan Pierre, and asked me why I got into this. And I said, well, to be a pro, why else? And then he said, do you think what you're doing now is enough to make you a pro? Right. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to say yes, but I thought there's no way what I'm doing would be enough. And then from then, I guess he started kicking my ass. So I ended up winning All-Canadian the next year, and then All-Canadian again the year after. I went to the Combine, didn't get drafted, but I suppose I opened people's eyes because nobody really knew who I was before the All-Canadian award. Then went back for my final year of university, the 5th year. All-Canadian again, like I said, and then got signed to the Bombers. So it was two weeks after the season. Played with the Bombers till 2016 season. They ended up releasing me in the off season, and then I signed with the Ottawa Red Blacks for a little bit. And that obviously didn't turn out the way it was planned. And my way back to Alberta happened because I needed money. And I heard you make money on the rigs. And then a buddy told me he was going up there to play football. I said, what the hell football's up there? And then he said, there's a men's league team or men's league in Alberta. And I said, yeah, right. And then he starts explaining what it was. And I think I talked to my dad the next day and he told me, he's like, yeah, I took you to one of those games when you were like 10. And then I started thinking back, or 10 or 12. I was thinking back, I'm like, I was actually at a game. I do remember that. I remember the Edmonton Stallions, but I never knew who they were.
Okay, so I was going to say, what team was an Edmonton Stallion? That's hilarious. How did your dad know about the league back then?
I remember going to like my so-called like uncle's football game.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Buddy of my dad's football game.
Your dad's best friend, who you call uncle, yeah. We know those guys, yeah.
For sure. And then, then I end up with Cold Lake in 2019 at the end of the year. And I guess you could say fell in love with Cold Lake, and I haven't left since.
Mm-hmm.
And I've enjoyed my time in the Alberta Football League, especially when it was at a time in my life where I thought football was over because what I called my home province kind of kicked me out of football completely in Manitoba. So it was my second life, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So AFL is definitely close to my heart. And that's what suppose brought me into this VP role.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I don't think you can do these kind of roles without caring for the league. And I know Vince has been around for a while, and he was actually he ran the Buccaneers for a while, and now he's running the league. So it's important to really get people that care. And I gotta say, quick story about you, Teej. This year I was playing for the Wolfpack, and we came up to play you guys in the semifinals, and Darrell Leeson doesn't self-admittedly doesn't have the arm that he used to have. I mean, he might be 50 years old, so that's to be expected. But I turned into a 5-yard possession receiver, and I'm sure you remember, but I want to appreciate you because every time I would catch those, you recovered me obviously, and every time I would catch those 5-yard hooks, I was bailing. Like I was on my way down before the ball even got to me because I knew you were coming full speed ahead, and you did every time. And every time your entire sideline kept calling me a pussy, but you kept standing up for me, and you kept saying he's making a business decision.
It's a business decision,
and I was, and I appreciate that, man, because people don't understand. Like I'm not sitting there catching 5-yard hooks and then going to try to get an extra yard when I've got Teej Sherman coming full speed and he's trying to take my head. I'm not doing it. So I just appreciate you standing up for me because your sideline was giving me a tough time. But I know. So okay, Vince, I know your story, but for everyone listening, tell us your football story. I know you and I both are Hunting Hills boys, and but start from there and your journey leading up to the AFL and into where you are now.
Yeah, you bet. Not a whole lot to talk about really with my high school career, mainly because it was probably long enough ago that I forget most of it. Played there kind of, I think, as the program at Hunting Hills was kind of starting to turn a corner. It was still a fairly young school when I went there. I think it opened in 95 or 96, and I graduated in 01.
Right.
So my last season with them would have been the 2000 season, would have been my grade 12 year. We made it to the B-side championship, and we won the B-side championship for Central Alberta. I finished my football there in 2000 was the last season. B-side championship for the team. Was kind of the best the team had finished it up until that point, being a fairly new school. And then that was also funny enough, at the end of that season was the same year the Buccaneers had their inaugural season. So I actually remember, I believe it would have been Jim Claggett, who was the first coach of the Buccaneers, came down to Hunting Hills, and he kind of spoke to us about a men's league team that was coming to Red Deer. Coming back to Red Deer, I guess. We had the Sooners before the Buccaneers, but we were they're setting up a new club with the Buccaneers, and we should come down and listen to the AGM and find out what it's all about. So it was kind of a big sales pitch on why you should play in the AFL, and I listened, and I kind of liked the idea, but being more or less a shithead 17-year-old at the time, I didn't really want to spend money on fees. So I didn't do that. And then I went to a couple of Huskies workouts, and we had a couple conversations there, but didn't really want to move to Edmonton. I guess the passion for football wasn't quite there yet at that age.
Yeah.
And then, but then it always kind of was in the back of my mind. It was kind of like that, you get that earworm song, and it's kind of the same idea. There's this idea festering in my brain pretty much every spring when you started seeing the new stuff about the Buccaneers starting their camps up and kind of the regular stuff they've always put out in Red Deer. And I always thought I should go play. Like, why not?
Yeah.
But just never did. And then I think it was the spring of 2016. And my father had actually passed away a few months previous. And I was at the car auction in Red Deer, which was something him and I did together. So I don't know what kind of all of that sentimentality kind of put me in the right spot. But a guy I've heard described as a smiling golden retriever puppy came bounding up to me and said, "You're big, you should play football." And that guy's Todd Lewis.
Todd Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah. He sold me on the Buccaneers right there. And I made a call and talked to Devo, and he kind of drove the point home. And the next thing you know, I went from almost completely forgotten about football to a 32-year-old going to a spring camp.
Yeah. And Devo, for those that don't know, is Devin Hand. He coached the Buccaneers for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Premium salesman as well. So,
yeah, definitely. Well, and good at what
tell you what you need to hear and we get you out.
Yeah.
So
that was 2016, right? Your first year, right?
Yeah. So that was the 2016 season, and then continued to play with the Bucs through to I guess it would have been the 2021, the post-COVID year, when the Bucs won. We won our AFL championship, and unfortunately couldn't play the national that year. And then, kind of hung up the cleats at that point and stuck around to be league president, as I was already league president at the end of that season, and carried out my tenure. It's a 2-year term with the presidency, and then
you were president of the Bucs there for a bit too, right?
Yeah, president of the Bucs, and then I shared the job with Mark Fay for a year, and then took over kind of all by myself for another couple, and then of course with a great board working with me, and then transitioned from that to league president and kind of stepped away from the Bucs board, and I've been doing that now. This will be my 3rd year as league president now. So.
And what's your playing status right now? Are you I know guys have been bugging you to come back. Have you made that decision? Will you announce your decision on this podcast?
I'll announce it when I make it. How does that sound?
No, that's fair. Yeah, we'll have you back on.
Yeah,
we'll have you back on because it'll be.
Yeah, I've still got that itch. There's a little bit of an itch, but I don't know.
Yeah,
the other side of the coin here now for a guy who's now staring down the barrel of 40, with a wife and 3 daughters at home who are all growing up faster than I can believe. That time in the summer becomes. It's not my time anymore.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
got to share.
Yeah, cool.
One question I want to ask both Teej and Vince, because Vince, you mentioned that football itch, and we'll let Teej let you answer first, and Vince too. Like, what would you guys describe that football itch? Because I know many players have it, and we all have it in different ways. But like, what would you best describe that to yourself or for someone where you to explain like the football itch as a general term?
I think the best way is, say your mom or your grandma makes you some fresh baked chocolate chip cookies, right?
Yeah.
And then you have one the first time, you're like, man, this is amazing, right? And then for some reason, all the other cookies get thrown out, right? And then one time you show up and you smell something outside that house, and you're like, there's no way she's making cookies again. And then you try to bust down that door. That's it.
that's that feeling.
That's the best. That is so far the best podcast moment we've had. That was incredible, Teej. What an answer.
You're like, your heart starts racing. Your blood is just.
Oh yeah. That's a tough one to follow for me. It's a little different for me though too. I mean, the first time I played football, I don't think I fell in love with it. I was tall, lanky, skinny. I think I was like 6'4" and 155 pounds the first time I put pads on. So definitely not the football player I am today, and it definitely wasn't a sport that was kind for me. I had no cardio, hated running, too skinny to be a lineman, too tall to do some other stuff. Like I had to wait until I packed on the weight enough to be a lineman before I really liked it. But I think that to me that itch is it's more of like a slow burn. Like just as soon as it's gone, you want it back. For me, during the season can grind, and I never want it to be over. But I'm like, I don't know if it probably makes sense to guys who have also felt it. You don't want it to be over, but you're also like ready for it to be over, kind of thing. Like the season's starting to hurt, it's starting to wear on you. But then, as soon as that's over, and having ended seasons on high and low notes, either way, it was kind of the same. It was like, all right, a week off. Okay, I'm ready to go to practice. When's the next practice?
Yeah.
When do I get to see the guys?
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Like you go from, you really go from, I mean, a lot of teams we start and, we're already going with the Bucks and winter workouts. So all of a sudden, we're seeing these people from January to August, and then at sometimes 2-3 times a week, sometimes more. And you start seeing them, more than you see other people in your lives, and in a really kind of intimate way, right? Like it's one thing to go and see your coworkers, but most people don't really enjoy being at work. It's a whole nother animal to like when you show up to that practice field, you want to be there, and then you see people you care about and that care about you. And I think that's what's so special about the AFL and what we have and how important it has been. I mean, even listening to Teej and you, Vince, but Teej saying like this league kind of revitalized him, and he loved it so much, from a guy that understands what high quality football is, and as a former CFL player, and having those opportunities, and then coming to the AFL and being like, what, this isn't, this is good, this is really good football, and I'm challenged here, and I like it here, and now I want to be a part of the league. And I think that's really cool. And I know, Vince, obviously you made the decision to be president again, and I know you probably talked with your wife and family on it because it's a lot of work, and you clearly love enough to sign on for 2 years. And so moving into that, I guess I'll start with you, Vince, as the president. In a perfect world, what's kind of your, like in this 2 years, let's take the next 2 years, what are some things you really want to see? Like how do you want the AFL to look in your eyes?
In my eyes, I mean, it depends on what facet you're looking at it from. If you're looking at it from a facet of like kind of what kind of players and stuff are we attracting, I don't know if I want to see a whole ton of change. I kind of like where it's at right now, to be honest, where we've got kind of we've got guys like Teej and other fellas like him that have got that deep football experience to go to, as far as being former professional football players. But at the same time, I don't think that it's so loaded with those guys that we also intimidate the kind of the 9-to-5er guy that's curious about football later in life from coming out and playing. And the talent is great. It absolutely brings people out to watch the games. But at the same time, you got Jim, the tow truck driver, who decided to come and play football in his 40s. And he might not get on the field as much as somebody who's seen the CFL, but he still shows up for every game. He shows up for every practice. And he, from running a team management standpoint and kind of a revenue standpoint, he pays his fees, and he brings out 10 family members every week, right? And they all pay to get a ticket. They all pay to buy a beer or a hot dog in the stands. And so that, those people to me are equally as important. So on the player side of things, the only thing, I think the biggest change, if you could call it that I'd like to see as far as our recruiting and stuff goes, is to just kind of clear up the confusion and stop having the kind of the controversy that seems to bubble up every year on how guys are recruited and brought in, and just kind of find a way to keep it clear and above board, and put to rest any questions that might arise along the lines of if rules were adhered to in the recruiting process. And then from like kind of a public point of view, like our, from, how we're perceived in the general public as the AFL. And I'll be the first to admit we've got a long ways to go in that department. We got to get our social media presence up in this day and age. I think our website has got a ways to go, and then I think just on a team by team basis, I think we can do some more work to kind of work with local media and kind of get them on our side. I know with my tenure with the Bucks, and previous to me, I'm not going to take credit at all for building this, but even previous to my time with the Bucks, I remember hearing spots on local radio, and then as president of the Bucks, I remember there was one season there, I think it would have been the 2019 season, and maybe even in 2018, where I'd do basically a radio tour on Wednesday and Thursday, where I do a couple morning shows in Red Deer, and in the afternoon I pop into a couple afternoon shows, and just kind of sit. I'd sit down and talk to 2 or 3 radio stations every week, and get the word out on our games, and I think it helped to kind of fill the stands too. So to see more of that around the league would be great. And that's kind of the 2 big things.
Yeah, we're going to come back to the next question will be kind of on that integrity of the league and recruiting and paying players, and kind of obviously that's been a hot button issue over a couple of years. So we're going to come back to that right after this. But Teej, same question. What is, and obviously you and Vince are working together, but like I want to hear your unique perspective. What drove you to be the VP? What do you want to see?
I think the first thing was I guess how everything was handled. I guess from the top down. I really wanted to find out how everybody thinks, how decisions are made, biggest thing honestly is how decisions are made, I suppose, and to see how much effort everybody's putting in if they can, because obviously I do realize running these kind of leagues, right, are volunteer. We don't get paid, and we all have full-time jobs just like all the players, right? But it's easy to sit on the outside, still having to make all these extra decisions and critique. And I have a lot more respect for some people than I did before. That's definitely for sure. What I feel the AFL will look like in a few years is our board and our executive will be working more together and might be separated when it comes to decision making. I would like, it's very hard, I feel like, for teams to make decisions without thinking about their team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Ryan Belrose touched on that in our last episode. The way the system's set up is you've got team representatives who are on the boards of their teams who then become league representatives. And when things are put to a vote, the current voting system is each team gets a vote. So the president and the vice president, any one of those people do not get votes. Those can be whoever, but it's the team reps that get 1 vote each. And so basically what happens is teams naturally vote for the things that benefit their team the most, not necessarily what benefits the league the most.
Yes. And it would be, I feel like it would make sense to be able to have somebody on there that from each team that maybe isn't a football player specifically, but more of a business, more important in the league, I guess you could say. Maybe presidents of each team have to have more importance, I guess. But yeah, I think at the AFL executive board members, everything, how we're going to run it, I feel like in the next 2 years that everything's going to be a lot different and a lot better. And when it comes just to players and gameplay and media coverage and all that, like Vince said, we're behind, and everything starts from the ground up. So everything takes time. So within the next 2 years, I would see us having a very heavy social media presence. Easily, I would assume YouTube, we'll use YouTube or some of these like local places that can broadcast us. Maybe using a little local businesses better, might be better. Maybe like an Alberta brand kind of one instead of just YouTube kind of thing. Like if we can get on like Shaw. I know there's some YouTube teams that play on Shaw or whatever, but I think with the conversations I've had with people who are very interested in the league, especially media wise, we're gonna look good soon.
Well, that's really exciting from my perspective as someone who really does love and care about this league. And I've said this before, but I feel like I owe the league a lot and I want to give back to the league. And so for me to hear you guys, talking about that kind of stuff, I think personally, the AFL is such a cool product and especially nowadays, it's such an entertaining product. I mean, we have good football games. These are good athletes coming up. And I love what you said earlier, Vince. It's got a great mix right now with like elite level players and also 9-to-5 guys that are coming out of high school. I know for myself on the Bucks this year, I'm playing with a bunch of kids that I coached in high school. I coach at Sylvan Lake High School. I have for about 5 years now. And I'm now playing with a bunch of kids this year, and for me that's really cool and a really special opportunity. But I think we have a really good product, and even putting out this podcast in our initial talks with Omari, it was like I think we have something that people want to listen to. I think that people feel the way that we do about this league. I think people really do like this league, and we need to have all hands on deck. And Omari, I think you'd agree with me, all hands on deck with just promoting this league.
Absolutely. There's more has got to be done. And, Teej, I'm in the same boat with you this year where there's more kids are graduating. I do a lot of coaching here. Did a lot of coaching here in the city, and again, they're asking, reach out to me, hey coach, what do I want to do in my next steps? And just with how recent events have rolled down from youth sport to junior to now AFL, where kids those are leaving high school, they're like, AFL is becoming a very apparent choice for them down the road because of how roster caps are and tryout numbers and roster spots and everything. Where it was definitely going to be somewhere, we're on the verge of greatness and just an explosion of the league exposure. So adding new blood, right? That's definitely a big thing that I like to see. And, Teej, you see it and I see it just from the Wolfpack and what we see and every other team. So no, it's a budding opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I think we do have the right people in place, and that's why I really wanted to have you guys on, Vincent and Teej. I want people to know who you guys are. I want people to understand that this is a hard job, and the people doing it are doing it because they do really care about the league and they have the best interests at heart. And I mean, getting our games onto YouTube or getting them on broadcast via Shaw, that just brings more attention to the league. And when, for yourself, Teej, when you were telling the story about, when you heard about the league and you were like, hey, there's no way there's a men's football league. And then you came here and you're like, wow, that's amazing, right? How many people out there like you don't even know about us, but would just love to be able to play?
I think there's lots. And the first thing you do for recruiting is you call people right? You call your friends, you call people you've played with. And calling 2 or 3 who I thought maybe were still playing football, had to be, or not, and just working and nothing else. And I said, well, I'm out in Alberta playing in a men's football league. Why don't you come check it out, see what it's about? And sure, why not? And everybody else I've been talking to, you could say in Manitoba, just have no idea. No idea there's a football league. Same as Saskatchewan. They have no idea there's a men's league.
No, BC is a football hotbed, and there's nowhere to play for those kids, right?
Right. So that's why I think another thing is so important about our league is that there's only a few other provinces that have it. Yeah.
Well, and it's basically us in Ontario. I know the Maritimes have it, but I'll be honest with you, I've seen that football, and it's not great.
So that's what I mean. We have a product that people want, and especially will want as football continues to grow.
Yeah.
And to add to the growth part too, we're in such a unique time where there are more pro football leagues in our time. Before, Teej, it was, and when you left Manitoba, like it's NFL, CFL. Those are the two. Where now, like I was telling my brother this, you're in a good window where you got NFL, CFL, USFL, XFL. I mentioned AFL there, but there's other leagues you can look at, and there have been guys who've come to our league on the AFL, played really well, showcased himself, and have got opportunities to spring invites, CFL camps, and everything. So there's that also budding side where guys who just need a little bit more time or a little more touch up just on whatever they need to work on, and away they go. So I think just this year we had like Teej, get a guy in Cold Lake, the O lineman. What's his number? 67?
66. Or
66.
Which depending which one you're talking about, which story.
Yeah. You'll know more, but didn't he get an invite? Because I saw an article where he got an invite to a camp, correct?
66 signed with the Elks.
Oh, awesome. I see. That's huge.
But 5, Jade Rowe, and 19, Malik Richards were the ones who had the tryouts with the Elks during the season.
And that's huge, just to have a little opportunity where, as much as people want to say, oh, it's beer league, it's this or that, I know this is good quality football that's led to guys getting that opportunity that you can dream of or like want, and you just need that extra push. So that's awesome to hear for those guys. Congrats to those guys.
Yeah. So kind of moving into that recruiting part, Vince, I'll start with you here. So what are our, like, obviously it's not a secret. We've had issues with teams getting caught paying players, which as it stands right now is not allowed in the AFL. So for those that don't know, you cannot compensate players in any way right now to play for an AFL team. Now I've thought about this for a number of years, and I guess what I want to ask is there, in your opinion, Vince, and I'll ask this the same to you, Teej, after, but is there a way that the AFL can propose a system where there's some sort of way to, quote unquote, pay players, whether it be flights or rooms or helping with or whatever it might be, some sort of like cap budget where we could bring in people like in a limited capacity where then it's fair for all the teams, and maybe does that help stop the cheating? I don't know, but like, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts, I think the first hurdle you'd have to clear before you could even discuss that would be essentially, rebuilding the way that the board is. We couldn't, I don't think you could, I'm not going to say you couldn't trust, but I don't think you could ask a volunteer board and executive to oversee that kind of workload. I think to do that properly, you're going to need, you're going to need accountants on staff. You're going to need people who can actually watch the flow of money. You're going to need people on each team who are going to be capable of filing a detailed financial report to kind of basically to be auditable. Because we're going to have to, if you're going to start paying players, that means you're also going to be auditing teams. And to do that, I think that's the first major hurdle. And then as soon as that happens, then we may as well become as legit, I'm not going to say we're not legit now, but we would be an actual semi-pro team or league, as opposed to what people throw it around now. But I don't think that happens until, management is paid, right from the league president right down to team heads, and with proper team staffs in place. And then for the second part of your question, if that maybe with, stop cheating. I don't think that allowing the payment of players in itself would stop cheating. I think it would be the checks and balances you'd have to put in place to police the payment of players. That would maybe mitigate it a little bit. But, basically as it stands at a volunteer level, we've got to self-police. And in order to effectively self-police, I think we just have to say no compensation.
Teej, your thoughts? You're pretty much in agreement, eh?
Oh yeah, I agree. Like you got to pay people when it comes to that. Like up top, that's where it starts, right? Like it would be even too hard just to go each team. You guys pay for your own thing, do your own thing. Even then, like we say, the discrepancy of pay could potentially be huge, but that could be huge because the entire league might not be any good because only a few people are getting paid. Or a few teams are paying their players. The other teams don't have money. And like I said, it would come from the top, so it would have to be a huge sponsor, because if people had all this money to pay players, we already would be. Like it's not like each team is out here every year has like brand new jerseys. You know, the stadiums are all full. All these things, right? We all have teams have our struggles. Like we get pretty good fans, but it's not like we're full enough that we can do all this extra thing.
Well, we're not.
Mhm.
We're
And
definitely
just
not
kinda-
for profit. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I mean. And so you could look at something like you say the XFL. We need big sponsors to come and want to do something big with us, but then I feel like you would lose the Alberta Football League part of it. Then it would be gone. It'd be something different now. We have to have a new name, new branding.
Yeah.
Well, and then to kind of add to that too, kind of a parallel, I think, different sport, but same part of the world, right? Would be the Chinook League with hockey, who I believe the Chinook League's folded now, or at least it's not in Central Alberta. I might be wrong about that, but they did have kind of that sort of a structure where they had basically some former NHLers end up in the Chinook League because it's getting paid. So like I said, I think they called themselves Senior AAA men's hockey. So it was a semi-pro league in a way, but it was a regional semi-pro league. And the way that they pulled it off, the way that they were able to essentially bring in enough money to pay the bills, was to be based in small towns. Because I think a problem that, especially in the AFL, would run up against if we wanted to really focus on drawing crowds and making money for the league is, I think our bigger center teams would have issues. Edmonton and Calgary, absolutely, competing with a CFL team, junior teams, university teams. They're not the biggest football draw in town. And that's just a simple fact.
Yeah.
And then even a city like Red Deer, where 100,000 people, or even, to a degree, Grand Prairie, Fort Mac, same thing. Big enough cities that there's just other things to do in the summer. So unless you're putting an absolutely mind-blowing football product on the field, you're going to have a hard time getting people outside of friends and family to come down and pay for the games. And, we get some of that in Red Deer. Some just genuine football fans that come out and watch football, but you got to start organically generating more fans that aren't related to members of the team.
Yeah, so I
start
think
making the money.
Yeah, and I think I mostly agree with that. I think on one hand, I think paying fees to play creates a commitment because you want to get value out of your money.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important in our league with a lot of people, teams struggling with practice numbers and stuff like that, and in that culture. So I think I think if you decide to pay players, there's a lot of issues with guys who think they should be getting paid and aren't, and then they don't come to practice. And then the guys that are getting paid and think they don't have to come to practice because they're too good because they're getting paid. I like the working man's league of hey, we are out here paying fees. We are doing this for the love of the game. Yeah. When you start paying people, now you're not doing it for the love of the game. And like Teej and Vince said, that's what our league is about.
Well, and the minute you allow even 2 or 3 paid players on a roster, at the surface you think, well, that's two or three guys that aren't paying fees. But I think in reality, that's about 75% of the guys aren't paying fees anymore because, you want me to pay $350, $400, in some cases $500 a year to play a game beside that guy who's getting $200 or $300 a game. Like, yeah. The short answer you're gonna get out of those guys is fuck you. Yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah, no, and that's good to put that to bed. And I think we'll have you guys on a later date, closer to the season, and I'll ask you that question. But all right, so just some quick stuff here to fire off here as we end. I know this is a personal question from me because it's just been something that I've been pushing for a long time, and I just kind of want to see it happen. I would love to see our league get a new trophy, a new championship trophy. Our trophy is very old and kind of like not that nice, and you kind of like when you see guys like the Grey Cup, the Stanley Cup, like people love lifting that thing. It's a cool iconic moment. Is there any of those talks happening with that? Like it not necessarily, like you said, Vince, you really like where the league is at right now, and I agree. But like the improvement comes from things like, I think, like that, like streaming, like little things like trophy, like just for my own curiosity. Is that in the works at all?
There hasn't been any discussion of it. That being said, I'm not going to disagree with you about the state of that trophy. It lived at my house for a good chunk of the off season there. Actually. Yeah. And sorry, not for the off season, but for, during last season, once the season started, as president, I pulled it in and held on to it until I could hand it out again. But yeah, I mean, I put it up on a shelf where the kids couldn't touch it, and I was still scared that something might fall off of it. It's it's definitely had the rounds around the AFL, and I don't disagree with you on the state of it. As far as, has there been discussions about replacing it? No, not really. I mean, you broached the subject now, so maybe it'll come up.
Yeah.
And if enough people show interest, I'm sure it's something we can explore. I mean, it's not going to be, it's not a hard sell.
You can comment in the comments, or go to change.org, and we'll get a petition going up. Okay?
Yeah, there you go. Go get a GoFundMe going for it.
Well, hey, honestly, yeah. Like, hey, $5 a player, we get a nice $1,000 trophy. Like, easy. It'd be sweet.
I don't like at the time.
Maybe I'll use this moment to just remind you guys that this is the unofficial podcast, so that's not necessarily the president endorsing a GoFundMe.
No, Vince, this is definitely off the record for sure.
Having held the trophy, I guess last year, I was the first time I even really seeing it like that. It's definitely dated, you know what I mean? And I guess to me, it's more of like a tradition thing, I suppose. Yeah. This is kind of crazy that I'm holding this up, and Glenn Dembicki held this up 20 years ago or something like that.
Yeah. Glenn held this trophy when he still looked like a kid.
Right, and when I handed it to him, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. But
okay,
I get it. I get the look. I get what you mean. It looks kind of falling apart, but
yeah. I mean, maybe I think at minimum, I'll agree right now. At minimum, I think some maintenance is due on her.
Yeah,
but, I do definitely, having held it the year before. I do definitely agree with what you're saying too, Teej. The tradition of holding that thing's pretty cool. Right. Having a beer out of it, knowing,
I don't know, man.
It's knowing how many other guys have lived in that moment before you, holding that trophy. So there's something to be said for the old.
I agree.
All I'm gonna say is it's not just Glenn Dembicki. Glenn Dembicki's DNA is definitely all over that thing.
I won't get too much deeper into that one.
Yeah. Oh boy, it's not that kind of podcast. Teej, your best game you've ever played in CFL, junior, whatever, the best game you've ever played.
Well, I was because I thought maybe I'd get this question. I had thought a few things, and I guess one popped them into me right before I got on. But I had two games that were best games I played in. I guess more personally than the whole game itself, I suppose. But they were in my first year university, and when I got to the U of M, I wasn't starting. I was just working for a spot, and I had set a goal for myself that when we played the U of A in Edmonton, that I would be the starter, and that was like game 3 or something like that, or game 2. And so that was just my goal. And the day before our first game, my DB coach, Richard Banovich, came up and said, "You know what? You're the starter." And I was pumped, and I don't remember the first game, to be truthfully honest. I was just pumped that I'm getting to play against U of A in Edmonton, because I felt like I wanted to be there and I wasn't. So I get to the game, I end up having 3 interceptions. I dropped 4 others and could have had a record that would probably never have been broken. But
hold on, wait. You caught 3 interceptions, but you dropped 4. So you could have had 7 interceptions?
Yeah, it was 6 or 7, yeah.
Holy buddy.
But I did get 3 knockdowns or something. But I was like,
oh man! So they didn't realize that they should probably stop throwing at you at some point, or like
I guess not. One was a punt. One was a legit punt, but that was whatever.
Yeah.
There was a game also that same season. I think 2 games later we played Saskatchewan Huskies, and our quarterback struggled in that first half through 5 picks. We were down, I think 28-0 or something, and we stuck with our quarterback. And then in the third quarter, I think right at the end of the third quarter, their running back, I don't remember his name, but he was destroying our defense. Comes around the corner, he kind of makes a move, somebody takes his foot, and I just come flying through and just destroy him. And unfortunately broke his leg.
Oh.
And at that point, somehow it started a comeback, and we threw 5 touchdowns and kicked a field goal to win or something like this.
Okay,
so
Teej, we have come full circle. I would just like to go back and just talk to your sideline, because I know there's a lot of Jets players who called me a pussy for just catching it and going down. That is why I did that. So I do not have a broken leg because I made a business decision. So Cole Bridges, I think it was Cole Bridges who was leading the team. Okay?
Cole would have took that hit for sure. Cole would take that hit every day.
No, yeah, and see, that's fine. Like, listen, I got other things, dude. I want to golf in the summer, man. I can't golf for the okay?
Hey, that man Bridges is a different breed. So
yeah, he's good. We're gonna have him on here soon too. Sweet. Vince, and I wanted to ask you this because I know you from being your teammate for a long time. I know you've got to have at least one. So, best road trip story.
The absolute best ones I probably don't remember, but
okay.
I think I thought about this a little bit too. I think maybe I'll just give you kind of the best road trip in general. I think probably would have been it's kind of a funny one. It was 2018 when we went up to Grand Prairie.
Oh, I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Was it you're thinking of the QB3 night?
No, I'm thinking of the pants.
The pants, what's that? Yeah, the pants were also part of that trip, I guess. See, that was just that whole road trip in itself was wild.
Yeah.
Having Donnie rescue us with the pants, Donnie Lewis.
Yeah.
Man, that we're definitely gonna miss a little moment here for him, but he, we get in the bus. I think we stopped in Whitecourt for lunch, and it was at that point in time we realized no pants on the bus. Well, shit, what are we gonna do now? Like, no practice pants in our bags, nothing. Like, we can't play in girdles.
Yeah.
So Todd phoned his dad from Whitecourt. So of course we've already got about a 3-hour head start on him. And Dad, pants are in the sea can. They didn't get loaded on the bus. We need them here. And so I don't know how Donnie did it. I've heard rumors of alternate routes and all sorts of different speed limit violations.
Yeah, and, I've heard like 200 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, but he managed to get there. We warmed up in our either in our practice shorts or in our girdles.
Yeah,
and it was like literally right before the coin toss. We were pulling pants on the sidelines. Donnie made it happen though. He got it there before kickoff. Didn't have to delay the game or anything. Didn't have to forfeit for uniform issues. And then we went out there and we played. I think we had 2 quarterbacks. I think that was the only year I played for the Bucks where we had 2 legitimate quarterbacks on the team, and of course neither of them could make the game. Mm-hmm. We had, I think, a wedding for one, and whatever. They both had personal shit going on. Couldn't make the game. So Josh Blanchard comes out, and you're the stats guy, so I don't know if it still stands, but I think he set a touchdown completions record that game.
Yeah, 8 touchdown passes in a game.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, QB3.
Yeah.
And then
never practiced.
Yeah, never practiced it. He just kind of, he played with Brandon out at Mount A, so I think he kind of knew Brandon's playbook well.
Terrific receiver, very good receiver.
Great receiver.
Yeah.
And I guess record-holding AFL quarterback as well.
Yeah.
And then that night, of course, going out and doing what the Bucks do on a road trip in Grand Prairie, and headed on over to the Grand Prairie Royal Ballet. Saw some of the finest dancers in town. And And then I remember it was a pretty long walk home. I think we cabbed there, and we ended up, the cabs were ridiculous to get back. So we ended up hiking back with with B Block, and the boy was absolutely in love with a stripper. Like, I don't mean like he really enjoyed his lap dance or anything. I mean he was Twitter pated by this girl. He said, I said, well, what's your name? And he said, it's gonna sound crazy. Like it's gonna sound crazy because it must be true, but her name is Destiny. And I said, I think that's not her real name. Oh, it's her real name. I said, okay. But he was just the whole way home. I've never heard a guy gush about a girl like that before or since. And it was a fun night all around, all the whole crew there. I think there was a long hike for some McDonald's there by a handful of guys who were kind of our saviors, and they were gonna walk the couple blocks down to McDonald's, and I think it ended up being about 4 kilometers away. So
shout out to Brandeth Blocker, played DN for the Bucks for a number of years, absolute beast. Fallen in love with a stripper named Destiny. That's amazing. We're trying to get him to come back and play again this year. I know defensive coordinator for the Bucks this year, Ryan Miller, who I'll have on the podcast at some point as well. Working hard on B Block to come back. Yeah,
that'd be good to see that guy around. Love him.
Yeah. Those Vince, I tell you, and I'm sure other teams experience this too, but like those Grand Prairie road trips they're just.
They're different.
Like
they hit different. I've actually honestly had the thought this year, like if my decision falls on the not playing side of the line, maybe as team president, I should join the Bucks up there for that road trip.
Yeah, bill it to the league.
As a duty to my league.
Yeah, bill it to the league. And then quickly on top of that, Vince, I wanted to ask you. I know you headed up to Cold Lake for the championship game to present the trophy. Anything fun and interesting happened that night because I believe you went out with the team afterwards, right?
We went out for a bit. Honestly, as far as the AFL goes, one of my quieter nights. The game, I came up and I watched the Wolfpack. I think I actually was out a little bit longer that night, but the hotel up in Cold Lake heard that I was the president of the league, and I think it was the first time I've been treated as a president since I became president. And they saw me come in, and I gave her my name, and she said, "Oh, Mr. Roth, I guess Mr. President, right? You're the president of the league." I said, "That's right." She said, "Okay, we've upgraded you to our presidential suite."
No way.
Yeah. So I honestly, it was a long drive up there that day. I think I had a couple of beers after that game and ended up crawling to a nice king size bed by myself. And
that's right. I remember you seeing, and that's the game where I'm talking about making those business decisions. I remember you being there. Yeah. Teej, last one for both of you before we get going. Teej, the biggest douche you've ever played against in football?
Man, I've been thinking like for a couple of days or a day now about that question. And I don't know. I honestly can't think of somebody that I thought was the biggest piece of shit opponent or, some guy I hated playing against, or I guess anything like that, unfortunately, which I was actually kind of upset about. I've definitely had some douchebag teammates, that's for sure. But
okay. You can name them here. This is uncensored.
I'm definitely not. I'm definitely not. I'm definitely a little bit more handle yourself kind of person. So But no, I was really thinking about it all day, and actually, I enjoy thinking about it because I had to think about so many different, teams and players, and just started thinking about games and all this, and it was good. I appreciate the topic, but I honestly don't. So,
well, you know what? I appreciate you saying that. I'm glad. Obviously, I send some questions to our guests beforehand so they can have time to prepare and to really give good quality answers. So I appreciate you taking your time, and I'm glad that I can ask some questions that provide some thought and also allow you to kind of get back into your memory of football. That's pretty cool.
One last thing. Last thing.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I do remember, like, as you kept talking, I remember being on Winnipeg, and I was actually got in trouble, I believe, my second year, or was it my first year, for helping an opponent up.
Okay.
Sure. I got in trouble. The coach did not like that.
Yeah, you leave his ass down there.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Vince, how about you?
For me, I'm going to say it with fondness in my heart. Levitsky and I have always had good times hating each other. I think it's become a frenemy situation over the years. The guy's definitely grown on me. I mean, but there was a stretch there. I think probably 27, kind of as I was getting my feet wet in the management and the AFL side of things.
Yeah,
where he was just absolutely more so of like kind of a social media hero. He was just a relentless shit talker online to the point, and I'm not averse to that. I'm pretty good at it myself sometimes.
Yeah.
But he got me to the point there of just absolute frustration for a while. And then but then on field, like I remember one play specifically against him up in Fort Mac, and I believe we threw a pick, and everybody else, of course, all the skinnies get downfield fast to try and make the tackle on that pick, and me being one of the slower linemen, I was kind of bringing up the rear, and Levitsky, I saw him kind of peel off from kind of the main group going to the ball. And him and I kind of made eye contact, and I remember making a head nod, like basically we're going to have this nice big fuck you collision in the middle of the field. We're going to have, a 700-pound collision. And, that's exactly what happened, but I didn't tuck my chin or get my pad level quite as low as I should have. And he absolutely blew me up. I think he got flagged on it. And then, but by virtue of being him. So at the end of the day, I guess I kind of did win the play, and that I got a little bit of a penalty on that pick. But that was a funny one because I got up and I got up laughing and walked off the field. And I remember coming to the sidelines and a couple of guys were like, "Oh, that asshole, you owe him one." And I said, "No, that was totally premeditated by both of us." Like, that's just how we play.
I have witnessed a few of you and him going at it, and I you guys have always been. It's never been like evil or anything. It's been you're exactly. I think frenemies is the right word. Like you're both competitors, and Travis is. I'm the same way with you, Vince. I think I've kind of grown to like him a little bit more over the years when you realize he's a lot of bark, especially online, and he'll talk a lot of shit. But then he's also a pretty good dude. Like honestly, he's a pretty
absolutely. It's everybody's got a different personality, and he's definitely a big one. So for as far as kind of a tongue-in-cheek douche, that would be him. And then I remember also pretty clearly, don't know the guy's name, don't even really clearly remember the number he wore, but he was a DT for the Wolfpack, I think in 2019. And I remember him just absolutely running mouth. He pulled Kyle Williams' helmet off in that game, I think 3 times, like face masked him to the point that his helmet came off. I mean, I had a few conversations with Kyle about maybe tightening your chin strap too. But yeah, he was just kind of ridiculously over aggressive. I don't know if he was a juicer or what was going on with him, but he was a way over aggressive. And I remember him to the point of post game, Kyle and a couple other guys actually went out not to meet him in the parking lot for a fight, but basically to run him off because he was out there running mouth, yelling some pretty horrible shit at wives and moms after the game. So, that's the absolute douchebag. That's he by far. And like I said, I don't really know how I could identify him because I forget his number. Never knew his name. But
damn it, we are going to do research. We're going to find out who this guy is. I want to know.
Yeah, probably. I think I messaged Burak after the game. I was the president, and I basically told him, like, if you guys play in Red Deer again this year, because I think that's how playoffs are shaking out, like, make sure he's not on the bus.
Yeah,
because,
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
Omari?
One thing I wanted to one question I wanted to ask both you guys, because I think you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, is just with recruiting and how it's formulated in the league. Is that something now, just, as the league president and vice president, do you want to see it tighten up or just more formality to it? Because right now it's kind of free for all, as to most people understanding.
I mean, for me, it's kind of an imperfect system to have to prove your innocence. I don't like that, but at the same time, going forward, having learned what we learned in the last couple of go-arounds with the compensation hearings and essentially the infighting that comes with it and everything, I think the best way to moving forward, the biggest change that I could really ask for without changing the system entirely, is to just kind of for teams to keep better notes or keep good notes, keep records. If you get a player paying for rent where it could maybe be misconstrued that the team's paying his rent for him or something like that, which comes up, make sure your players understand, especially players that could maybe be labeled as recruited. Like, make sure they understand that, this gets looked at. So make sure you get receipts for your rent. Make sure you've got bank records that can show this came out of your bank account if the league wants to see it, to kind of exonerate us for compensation. And I think if we can manage to keep clean records, it basically comes almost entirely, all these problems come down to what could have been addressed as clerical errors, right? If guys stay on top of their bookkeeping and their records, I think we could get to a place where any compensation conversations that come up that aren't, legitimate, they can be shut down and put away pretty quick. And that's kind of what I want to do.
And to follow that, then because one idea I've always had is like, it'd be great to where if I had like a transaction portal, or like an NCAA like a transfer portal where players, it's like if you're going to be going from, say, so let's just say someone got a job in Grand Prairie and they got to go from Red Deer to Grand Prairie, say, hey, like I'm transferring from Red Deer to Grand Prairie. Do you think there'd be something the AFL like to see, or like a portal of some kind where it's like, hey, you enter where you're going, that way then there's clarification on that?
I think with the way it's structured right now with player movement, that's not really entirely necessary, because for any player movement to happen from team to team, essentially requires the blessing of both team managers, right?
Yeah.
So, like, for example, the guys in the room, so we'll talk about them. Last year, Ty went from Edmonton to the Wolfpack. So, that was essentially, there was a lot of other discussion around that and everything. I know that, but at the end of the day, what that comes down to is for Edmonton's management to say, yeah, we release him. He owes us nothing. And then because there's really no other way to withhold it. The only way you can really withhold a release on a player is if he owes something. And then for a mid-season transfer, there kind of has to be a legitimate reason and discussion for it. So that kind of covers that transfer portal ideal in itself. And then off-season movement obviously is a lot simpler. But if a player played somewhere previously, he needs to be formally released before he moves. So if that makes sense or answers your question, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's good. And that's probably good clarification for everyone else who's listening to this.
Yeah. Omari, anything to finish here?
One last thing, and this just feeds into the whole YouTube idea, and I guess this is now something where I guess Teej and Vince you can take, but the way I see it, where I guess I probably should mention this back a bit, but a good idea just where the AFL League can get on top of the streaming and streaming of the games and highlights and moments, everything. There could be a way to where the league can have a monetized channel that YouTube can help, generate revenue for, and then that can be funneled to the league where it's alternate revenue from social media. Now I know it's probably like some eligibility requirements to hit that, but it's an idea that maybe the league or you guys want to look at more seriously, like how if we funnel more effort or energy to the social media side of things, get game streaming on YouTube, get moments, highlights, and all that posted, generate the views, generate the subscriptions, and monetization as opens up. So that's just an idea for you guys to take away and maybe have the league brew on. But that was just one point I wanted to add in when we're going over that.
I think the first step towards that would be to get all the teams in a spot where we can consistently and reliably provide clean game film every week.
Yes. So what's that?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, being in the league as long as I have and seeing the, back in the day, before Huddle's great now, but before Huddle, I don't even think it was necessary to load the film, and we'd put it up on YouTube and it was terrible. And now we live in this world where we have, you can get a camera installed, a Huddle camera installed at your facility that films the whole game. It moves by itself. It follows the action. And then 24 hours later, all your stats are done for you. It literally does your stats 24 hours later. So there's these,
Wow.
I know like a lot of like the school I coach basketball at in Lacombe, they have in their gym, and it's called Huddle Focus. And, you know, it's like 20 grand or something like that. And then there's like a yearly fee. It's definitely not cheap. But what it does is it's completely automated. It follows the flow. It automatically uploads it to Huddle as it's filming, and it has the ability to live stream. And then if you get that live stream, you can now charge for it or get advertisers on it. And I think for me with this podcast, and I know Omari in our talks, is like, we want to use this podcast to bring attention to the league because we believe that the product is really good. We want people to advertise with our leagues at our games. And if we have streaming capabilities, we got to think about it. Now we have a league, you know, we've got Teej that's coming from Manitoba and different places. We've got guys that came from Toronto. We've got guys that come from all over the place. All their families would love to watch. And what happens? Their families watch. Maybe they watch with some friends or some cousins. And then all of a sudden the word gets passed. And now people are watching the AFL. We're getting views. And then people want to sponsor. And I think once we have that growth of that through that, you know, initial investment of trying to get things like a Huddle Focus camera, we have a product that people want to watch. And I think you, Vince and Teej, have touched on it really well today of like, you know, we're kind of at the beginning, you know, Vince, this is your first kind of term as president. I know you were kind of like mulling it over. Now you're obviously fully committed into this. You've chosen to do this again. Teej, you're excited to be on and do this again. And I'm really excited for what this league can be. And everyone listening, I think we're setting up a Discord. We've got our Instagram channel. Talk to us, give us ideas. Vince and Teej are going to hear these things. We're going to have Vince and Teej on again closer to the season, get some updates. I'll have Teej, we'll have you on later when we do the season previews and we talk about Cold Lake and your team. I'll definitely have you on for that as well. But thank you guys honestly for coming. This has been really good, and people have been really positive towards this podcast and are really excited for it. I know I'm getting a lot of messages. When's the next one coming out? They were excited for this podcast, and you guys did a really good job. This is really good for me. And Omari, finish us off with, you know, where people can find us and all that stuff they got to do.
Absolutely. You can find us here on Instagram. We got some teasers that are going to be coming out here. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. The Discord channel is live. You can go into our LinkedIn tree, link tree just in our bio, and check that out and like allow for more discussion there. It is a work in progress because it is, I guess, the first Discord server I'm setting up, but it's something where I feel it's going to allow for a lot of collaboration, future opportunities to let people come together in the league and discuss. But check us out there. Hey, like, subscribe, comment, all helps us drive the algorithms. That way, then we get more popular on all these platforms. And hey, you know, end of the day, make sure you guys drink your water, take your vitamin D's. I know a nice little joke I like to say with Teej is he has his little pharmaceutical company whenever he gets ready for a game. Hey, you take care of yourself, and we look forward to seeing you guys in your next episode.
That's funny because, Omari being my teammate this year, everywhere I go, everyone's like, oh, you got to, I bring a lot of, you know, essential oils and beet juice and all this natural stuff. And people are curious about it, and it's really good. I like that. It's good to be curious about your health. All right, guys. Teej, Vince, thank you so much for coming on. Please give us some ratings, and please keep listening, guys. We want to make weekly episodes once a week, and we'll keep doing that as long as guys are continuing to listen. And it's really cool, and we'll keep pumping them out. So we've got more guest book already. Teej, Vince, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks a bunch.
That's good. I appreciate it.
Thanks, boys.